Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this update. I'm Joshua Dobi. Appreciate so much you taking a little bit of time to sit with me here and just hear a few words on a very narrow subject for this presentation, and specifically talking about what we've been seeing here in the markets in the first couple of weeks. Now, I don't want to get you too concerned. I don't get at all moved by what happens in a very short time frame. But I also understand that we've seen some movements coming into the new year here that we haven't seen a whole lot, at least not since the beginning of COVID, if you can believe it, all the way back in the first quarter of 2020. So I just wanted to take a few moments, give you this real quick update, and just give you a few thoughts on my perspective on it. First of all, again, for most of the equity markets, especially when we're looking at the more growth-oriented or more aggressive end of the equity universe, definitely in most instances we've seen a lot of pullback, especially if you have concentrations in the technology sector. We're seeing a lot of pullback right there, especially in companies that from an historical perspective trade at very rich valuations. We've seen a lot of pullback in a lot of those spaces, and you may have even noticed that inside of your portfolio. It's a very common kind of thing. As a matter of fact, in the course of a given year, these kinds of movements can happen 2, 3, 4 times, maybe even more. But it's very easy for us to not remember that as much, especially when things have been going so well in a positive direction for most of our major market indexes for the last couple of years. But we've seen some pretty intense concentration here, again, over the last, let's say, 3 weeks now, really since the beginning of the new year. And so when we're looking at it and we're seeing those kinds of performances, it can become very natural to say, oh my goodness, this is happening, should we do anything different? Well, I'm going to give you a pretty straightforward answer. Rarely is it the case where we need to do something drastic right away. That doesn't mean that tweaks sometimes are inappropriate, or making adjustments based upon your particular situation can't make a lot of sense, because indeed it can at times. But you want to make sure that you're making them for the right reasons. If we're just reacting based upon what's happening in a given several days or a couple of weeks, we're in danger of missing out on what may be yet lying ahead of us. And we're just guessing. Because if we're just guessing upon what's going to happen in a given moment, our chances aren't real good. We want to make sure that we're making the decisions for the right reasons and making them based upon trends, not based upon occasions. So a quick question that sometimes comes up, folks say, well, what makes a trend different than an occasion? Passage of time? And then folks say, well, how much time? More than an occasion? And I know that's a terrible answer, and I'm not meaning to be glib or funny in these moments, but rather just to give some illustration that it is not an exact science. We don't just say if something has been happening for 2 weeks, then we make a certain move, or if something has been happening for 2 months, then we make a certain move. But we take a look at a number of factors when we're putting together the algorithm of understanding what exactly is happening in the markets, and then using that to help us to make good decisions about what to do next. Sometimes, and oftentimes I would offer, the best decision is not to do anything, at least not in a given moment, until we have more data points of understanding exactly what may be transpiring. So there are a number of macro factors which are definitely in the mix right now, which are affecting the markets, and that is something that we're seeing in real time. Here we have inflation with significant numbers that we haven't seen for more than a decade. We have a notable increase in interest rates. And we've seen that happen, especially with the 10-year Treasury, the benchmark, that is so often used in so many of our financial circles for computations in a number of different arenas, moved from about 125 to about 185. You may say, well, that doesn't sound like a whole lot in terms of the actual movement going from 1.25 to 1.85. You'd be right until you look at it from a percentage standpoint. And percentage-wise, that's a lot of movement, especially in about 3 weeks. Of movement. So something that we definitely are keeping in mind, something anecdotal also to the increase in interest rates, when we're talking about, for many folks on a technical analysis standpoint, who are valuing high growth or aggressive growth companies, very often they're using a valuation algorithm that includes a discount model, which includes the benchmark 10-year Treasury. Without getting too lost in the weeds in terms of how that algorithm goes together, in short, when interest rates rise, the implied valuations or the implied market value of some more aggressive companies goes down. So we're definitely seeing that in the mix as well. But there are a number of different factors. It would be inappropriate if we would take a look at only one or two factors and say, well, this is definitely the reason why the market is moving in this way. Very, very rarely is that the case. And when that is the case, it's usually due to something that's more geopolitical in nature than it is in terms of actual technical or fundamental analysis. So very, very important to keep in mind. Again, the idea of increase in inflation, increase in interest rates definitely out there, and then a big bogey that I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of you regarding, and that has to do with the movements of the Federal Reserve. Obviously, that has a lot of implications for what happens with interest rates, but the Federal Reserve right now is in a space of looking at some competing items, and I don't want to speak for the governors or for the board, but it's been made known that they're looking at some competing items right now. They're looking at spaces where inflation is rising, but they're also not wanting to dampen the growth in the economy. And that's a very, very tough place to be. So the market's trying to guess right now. Is the Federal Reserve going to raise the overnight lending rate or not? Or if they are, how many times are they going to raise this year? So a lot of guessing, a lot of speculation right now, and that's part of the reason, not the entire reason, but that's part of the reason why we're seeing the turbulence that we're seeing. So putting that into the soup and a whole bunch of other factors as well, but I don't want to bore you too much with this update. What we're seeing right now is a very natural course rotation or market rotation when we see these kinds of things happening in the market. As I said at the beginning, these kinds of things happen all the time. So we don't want to get too moved when things are going great, and we also don't want to get too moved when things get a little bit rocky, especially in the short term. However, as you know, always feel free to reach out to me via phone, via email. Always, always, always. I enjoy hearing from you, especially now that the football season is almost over. And if you're a Steelers fan, unfortunately, it is already over. But or a Carolina Panthers fan, also already over. But when we're looking at where things are, I'm happy to chat with you into your specific situation if you have concerns or if you just like to talk about the kinds of things that are happening. For our friends in the Northeast and certainly out west, it is a chilly time of the year. And actually, I was just chatting with someone in Florida. Apparently, it's a little bit chilly in Florida as well. So I guess they can't brag so much about a little bit better weather there. But friends, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to sit with me here. As I mentioned, always feel free to reach out to me with your thoughts and questions. Until the next time, I'll look forward to chatting with you soon.